What is up, Maniacs? My name is Zach, and I am the Milly Maker Maniac. Welcome to our Week 6 Player Pool Breakdown. This is where I take you through my favorite stacks and who I will be playing at each position, and more importantly, in some cases, who I am not playing, to give you an idea of who I'm going to be attacking this week, and hopefully it gives you some insight on how you want to attack DFS tournaments this week to take down that Milly. Unfortunately, you're going to have to be content with second place because I got dibs on first this weekend. I got a real good feeling about this slate, feeling very confident about who we are attacking this week. If you hadn't had a chance yet, please go ahead and smash that subscribe button, as well as check out our game-by-game breakdown for the main slate video. Posted that up on Tuesday. Gives you a full breakdown of the review of my spreadsheet that I create, where I take matchup grades and look at where there is opportunity for offenses, and that's really how I start to build my player pool. But gives you an idea of where there are some matchup grades, matchup advantages based on PFF grades against their opponent, and see where are some good options to attack this week. The offenses with the most green, the most advantage, are the Rams, the Colts, the Chargers, the Packers, and the Cowboys, and it starts to taper off into neutral matchups with the Panthers, the Buccaneers, and Seattle as well. So we're going to try to attack these offenses that have these big matchup advantages. And then I try to pull from those offenses who are the guys that I want to attack in those offenses. So these are my favorite stacks of the week. I'll walk you through these, and then I'll walk you through my player pool at every single position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and our defense. Let's get into our favorite stack of the week. The Rams play the Baltimore Ravens this week. They have a massive advantage across the board. I think that they are just going to run the ball down their throat and win pretty handily. The field is going to be very heavy on Puka Nacua. I think Puka Nacua is incredible, and I understand why people want to play him, but I think he is a bad play this week at 8,700, despite a massive matchup advantage. The field's going to be all over him because they see this 26, 27, 25, 39, 25. But at this price, at 8,700, the only number here that would be something that would be usable for us to win a Milly Maker, I guess if you get this 25, you're not necessarily killed, but to really have success building lineups with an 8,700 in there, you're already at a really big disadvantage on building out the rest of your lineup. So even if he gets this 39 and you just have him in your lineup, it's going to be hard to build out the rest of your lineup to hit outcomes around this 25. Let's look at previous weeks. This is week 4. This is that 39 that he put up. What do we notice? When he has a huge week, he brings along his quarterback with him. It just makes sense. If a guy is going to have 200 yards and 2 touchdowns, that's a lot of points for the quarterback too, just to start. And if the quarterback throws any other touchdowns or has any other yards to any other players, which we know that they would be double teaming Puka and doing everything they could to try to take him away, if he's having that kind of game, that's going to open up other easy passing opportunities for other people on the team, which is going to be good for the quarterback. So if I'm going to play Puka, I'm also going to play Stafford, because if he has a game that's needed, like a 40-point game, then he's probably bringing Stafford along with him. If he has a 25-point game, he was a bad play because there's going to be a lot of other people in that same range at much lower prices, allowing us to get to more studs at running back and quarterback and tight end and at defense. So, all that being said, I love Puka. There is a very good chance he finishes wide receiver 1 this week, but I will not be attacking him unless I have Matthew Stafford in my lineup, or if I build a lineup and I get down to the flex and I've already got my defense in there and I just magically have 8,700 left, then I would put him in there. But that's pretty much never going to happen because it's a pretty tough slate when it comes to pricing. So I'm pretty much going to be fading these high-priced guys in Puka, and at running back, I'm going to be fading Taylor, McCaffrey, and Achane. Jacobs is where I'll start to get involved at 7,300. So that is the first stack you see does not have Puka in it. What I think is very likely to happen against the Ravens this week is they score around 35 points and they have a roughly 400 to 500 yards of offense. What really matters when it comes to fantasy points is who is going to score those touchdowns. We could see a scenario where Puka has a really good game with 150 yards, but he has no touchdowns, which means those touchdowns have to go somewhere else. And on the Rams, it's very obviously going to Devontae or Kyren Williams. Those are pretty much the only two other guys that are getting enough volume to score fantasy points on this team. Yes, Tutu's had a few weeks that he's been in the mix, and Blake Corum might get into the mix more if it's a big blowout in the second half here, but it feels like that's not really going to happen until like the fourth quarter. And even if he does get a lot around the fourth quarter, I don't think it's going to be enough to make a difference in the Milly Maker. If the Ravens push back at all, I really like Kyren. I mean, even if they don't push back, I feel like Kyren could score 2 or 3 touchdowns in the first half. Same with Devontae. They're more the red zone guys than Puka is anyways, and the field's going to be on Puka. Like I've mentioned it many times in many videos previously, I actually don't care about ownership percentages. At the end of the day, when it comes to who wins the Milly Maker, it's who scores the most fantasy points. It has nothing to do with how often that guy was rostered on everybody else's lineups. If somebody's going to be popular, like Kyren Williams and Josh Jacobs both will be this week, I'm just going to have to build better lineups with those guys in it because I think that they're going to be number 1 and number 2 at their position. Like I really think, we'll get to my running backs, but I feel very highly about Kyren Williams and Josh Jacobs both being top 5 guys this week at their position. So I want them in my lineups because of that, because they're also at a reasonable price. If Josh Jacobs was at 70 or at 8,500, then I wouldn't really get to him. He would be pretty much out of my player pool. But at 7,300, he can have a game where he scores 25 points, and that's very usable for me. Where at 8,500, 25 points is kind of a letdown. It's going to be hard for me to win in that scenario. So I'm going to be playing plenty of Kyren and Devontae lineups together with just those two without Matthew Stafford. I'll play tons of lineups with just one or the other in it. And then I will play some stacks with Stafford, and that's where I'll mix in Puka. And then I'll have different combinations of just Stafford and Puka, Stafford, Puka, and Devontae, Stafford, Kyren, and Puka. And then obviously the double stack with Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua as well. So that's how I'm playing the Rams. I think they're going to score a lot of points. These are the two guys that I think are the most likely to be slate breakers out of that matchup. So I'm going to try to have them as many lineups as possible. Josh Jacobs and Tucker Kraft, I think, are those two guys this week against the Bengals. Last week, we were really heavy on the Lions, and that ended up killing us because how the points were distributed. They did score a lot of points, but it went to Montgomery, Brock Wright, and Sam Laporta. And Laporta we had plenty of, but he didn't make big enough difference because we had plenty of Ferguson too, who actually scored higher than Laporta even with the 2 touchdowns. So it just didn't. We missed it because we were heavy on Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams and Jahmyr Gibbs. This week, it's not nearly as spaced out for the Packers versus the Bengals. We feel very confident that if the Packers score 4 touchdowns, that one, probably 2 of those touchdowns at least are going to one of these 2 guys or both of these guys. I will want to mix in some Jordan Love scenarios where he goes off, and we're mixing in Romeo Doubs and Matthew Golden and even a little bit of Dontavian Wicks. But our main focus is going to be on Jacobs and Kraft, spreading those guys across all of our lineups, as well as just having lineups with just one of them in lineups. I'm going to try to have at least one Ram and at least one Packer, primarily one of these or 2 of these 4 guys in every single lineup. The next team that I like to attack this week are the Cowboys. If I'm attacking Dak, the main stack I'm going to go after is Pickens and Ferguson with him, either solo stacks or a double stack together. Last week, really the nut with Dak Prescott stack was Dak, Javonte, and Ferguson, which I had a couple of those. That was actually my highest scoring lineup last week at 209, was a Dak, Javonte, Ferguson stack. But I think this week, if it's going to be a Dak week, I think it's going to be more to the pass catchers. If it's not a Dak week, then I like Javonte plus a pass catcher. So I like to play out scenarios in my head. If Dak throws 4 touchdowns, then Pickens and Ferguson and even Flournoy who we'll talk about here in a second, we've got to mix in there and feel like they're likely to be the ones that get those touchdowns as well as the yards. Like we're looking for a 304 type day from Dak for him to be needed. And so let's build out scenarios. Like if he hits that, how does he hit that? Does it go to Pickens? Does it go to Ferguson? Does it go to both of them? Does Florida mix in? So we're mixing in those different combos. We can also mix in some where he throws one to Javonte. But in another scenario, say they're moving the ball really well, which I expect them to do. Say Dak throws for 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. Well, in that case, then maybe Javonte runs for 100 yards and scores 2 touchdowns. So in that scenario, we're probably going to want Javonte plus one of these pass catchers. So that's why you can see with all these, I have the running back plus a pass catcher. All of these combinations of offenses, I believe, are going to have very successful days. If they have those successful days by throwing all their touchdowns, then the quarterbacks are going to be really awesome plays. But if the quarterbacks just throw 2 touchdowns, which is still a very successful NFL day and is a good indication of the matchup stats that we're looking at, but doesn't help us in fantasy, if that outcome happens, then more than likely the running back for that team hit pretty hard. So we're going to play both of those scenarios. We're going to play Dak throwing 4 touchdowns, and we're going to play scenarios with Dak throwing 2 touchdowns, but Javonte getting 2 touchdowns. So I think it's just important to think through those scenarios as you're building lineups and kind of taking a stance on what kind of lineup is this. If this is a Dak lineup, I'm playing it as if it's that 304 type day. If it's a Javonte lineup, I'm playing it as if it's a Javonte 100-yard, 2 touchdowns, and then somebody else, a receiver, has 100 yards and a TD or a tight end. So let's talk about Flournoy a little bit. He last week kind of came out of nowhere. We had a little bit of Tolbert, but we didn't have any Flournoy. But with Turpin out, he basically just took over the CD Lamb role, and Pickens just played his normal X-receiver spot. So it looks like Turpin's going to be out again this week, and I like Flournoy to just step right in back into that role this week. It might just be a this week thing, but I'll probably end up with around 10% of Flournoy as long as Turpin's out. So he's my go-to punt play of the week. All right, let's talk about the Chargers. The Chargers burned us last week. We were very heavy on Herbert and all of the Chargers receivers against that really bad secondary of the Commanders. What ended up happening was the defensive line for the Commanders dominated the offensive line for the Chargers, which was definitely a possibility coming into the game, but I anticipated that Herbert would be able to handle it better, and I think he actually handled it fine. There are a few big plays that were called back from holding penalties. And then there was that punt return that was called back for Ladd McConkey that also took away a 2-minute drill that they would have had in plus territory, even if he doesn't have that return. So those are more points for Herbert that we didn't get to go after. And then we had 2 scoring drives lost to turnovers. QJ fumbled around the 20-yard line as they were going in to score, and then Herbert threw a goal line interception as well. If one of those drives doesn't end in a turnover, obviously a lot of shoulda, coulda, woulda, but if one of those goes for a touchdown, we probably have a much better week. Like one of these guys hits a little bit harder than what they did last week, and we're not hurt as badly as we were this week. But obviously we got hurt by them last week, but that doesn't mean that we want to fade them this week. This reminds me a lot of the Atlanta Falcons having a very bad week 3 against the Carolina Panthers, a very good matchup where they got shut out. And we had a lot of Falcons that week. We were riding them heavy, but it didn't play out well. The next week they had another good matchup, and everybody was fading them because they had such a bad week the week before. They played the Commanders and then had a really big week. I think this is just going to be a week for the Chargers to reset. I don't think the game was nearly as bad as what it ended up looking for the passing game. It's just it played out funky in the second half. The Commanders just dominated that game and were on the field a ton. They just ran the ball, and the Chargers really didn't even get the ball in the fourth quarter. So I was still holding out hope for some fourth quarter comeback type points from Herbert, but they just never got the ball back. So it was just kind of an outlier game flow that hurt the Chargers, and I still have a lot of confidence in Herbert and these pass catchers, and they have another really awesome matchup this week against the Dolphins. And the nice thing this week is their disadvantage in the pass blocking versus pass rush is pretty neutral this week. It's pretty even matchup. So to me, what that means is it's going to be a much better outcome than what it was last week. So there should be more scenarios where they win, even though it's not going to be on every play. They're just going to win more often. And if they can win just a few times to give Herbert time against that awful secondary, they have a massive passing advantage in the secondary. They're going to have a lot of success. And the other component is we also have Omarion Hampton's injury. So he is out, and I just have no faith in those backup running backs. I think it's going to be split carries. And I think, honestly, what the coaching staff is going to do this week is just going to be like, Herbert, we know you can go win this game for us. We're not going to try to do anything special with our running backs. We're just going to let you go out and win the game. And I see that being a 300-plus yard performance, maybe some rushing. He's been scrambling a lot more. And at least one and probably two of these guys in the top 8 at wide receiver. So I'm going to be very heavy on the Chargers this week, and we'll likely have a Charger receiver in roughly 80% of my lineups, at least one Chargers receiver, even without Herbert. So we're going right back to the well there. Hopefully they don't hurt us again. But I feel very good about attacking these offenses here. The last really good offense against a bad defense this week is the Indianapolis Colts. Now, obviously, the obvious play would be Jonathan Taylor. I think Jonathan Taylor is an absolute beast. But at 8,500, if he even a 30-point game, like we go back and look at previous weeks, like last week he was actually not needed. Like you could play Dowdle, Ja'Cory Cross-Kamara, and Javonte Williams all at big discounts compared to where he put. Like I'd much rather have Javonte Williams at 29.9 than Jonathan Taylor at 31.6 when he's 8K, because that allowed me to get to Egbuka and JSN and Ferguson, right? So because of that, with Taylor being at an even higher price and where running backs often fall, like we often see multiple people around that 30 number, and lots of times they're at that lower price point. So we can get to guys that are going to get there. We're going to try to find those guys that are going to get to this big number, but at a more affordable price, allowing us to have a lot more success at getting to receivers. If Jonathan Taylor has like a 50-point game or something like that, then we're just hosed. It's just not going to be our week. But as long as he doesn't have a huge week that's like 10 points better than everybody else, we can still build lineups that are going to compete against him having a top 5 week. So because of that, I'm going to be playing this as if this is the week that Jonathan Taylor might get 100 yards, but he doesn't get any touchdowns. I think this offense is going to pretty consistently move the ball for roughly 400 yards of offense, and they can score in equal ways. So some weeks it's going to be in the run game, and some games it's going to be in the passing game. So I'm going to play a lot of stacks this week saying that it's coming from the passing game, which will give us a lot of leverage on the field. But I also think it's just as likely to go to these guys, the touchdowns, like those plays at the 5-yard line, I think are just as likely to be drawn up for Warren or Pittman as they are for Jonathan Taylor. But these guys are much cheaper and give us a lot of leverage on the field as well. So I'll be playing a lot of Warren and Pittman just on their own in lineups, and then I'll be playing plenty of Daniel Jones plus one of these guys, as well as the double stack with both of these guys as well. And I'll mix in a little Josh Downs as well. So these are my core offenses that I'm attacking. I'm going to try to be attacking at least 2 of these offenses in every single one of my lineups, be mixing and matching those lineups. But I do think from this core group that there are 6 of the 9 guys that you need to have are going to come out of this grouping right here. I really feel that strongly. So I'm going to just be playing around with a lot of different combinations of that core group here and try to get that perfect combination of the 9 people out of there. Now the Panthers are my next favorite stack. I really like Dowdle and Tedero McMillan as the 2 people that you're targeting out of that. You got the nice revenge narrative with Rico Dowdle going back up against the Cowboys, who just let him go and went for Javonte, which turns out to actually be a pretty good choice. But Rico's not looking at it like that. He had a 1,000-yard season there last year, and they didn't even offer him a contract. So pretty awesome revenge narrative there. And the Panthers' run blocking last week was exceptional. And against the Cowboys defense, I think both of these guys are going to have a lot of success, and there's a lot of scenarios that play out where they both have success on the same day. Leggett is a decent punt play, and also it sounds like Coker might be coming back this week. If Coker plays, I would also mix him in there as well. But Rico and Tetaroa will be the two guys that I will be targeting the most out of this game. I'll build plenty of game stacks where this game goes off, and we'll also mix in some Bryce Young lineups as well. I like Drake May skinny stacks, Drake May to Diggs, Drake May to Henry. Diggs is going to be one of my core plays as well. Same thing with Darnold. Darnold at JSN obviously is the obvious stack. I'm going to try to get to JSN as much as I can. He's going to be my highest priced receiver at 7,600. I had the stack with him in Barner last week, but just had the wrong team comebacks. I had the Lions and Chargers in both of the lineups that I had that sweet stack last week. So one of them didn't even cash when I had the nut stack at quarterback, wide receiver, and tight end, but unfortunately missed everywhere else. But yeah, I'd say like these three here are pretty equal to me. I think there's pretty equal opportunity for all three of these stacks to go off. I'm going to mix them in across my lineups. But these are, I feel pretty confident here. Like there's a tier break for me. There's a tier break Colts and above. Then there's a tier break after the Panthers. Like the Panthers are like their own tier. Then I think there's a tier down here to the Patriots, Seahawks, and Bucks. Like there's plenty of scenarios where these teams go off, but there's also plenty of scenarios where they score like 2 touchdowns and get a few field goals. Like there's multiple outcomes for these teams that could play out. So I'm going to be mixing them in. I'm going to have some lineups built to like where they go off and they have the big outlier games like both the Seahawks and the Bucks did last week in that game against each other. I like the Baker game against the 49ers to have that possibility, but I can also see like a 20-17 outcome for all of these games that they have. So I'll be playing these, but it's definitely a tier break below the Panthers here. And then I have another tier break where I go down to the Jags. The Cardinals, we don't know if Kyler's playing yet. If Kyler plays, we'll build roughly 5 lineups with him. And then the 49ers, I like Jennings quite a bit. Sounds like he's going to play. McCaffrey, you can't really get to at 8,400, but Jennings and Tongus are the two guys that I like to pick out of here, and I'll build some Mac Jones hero lineups as well. But it sounds like Jawan's going to play, and Pearsall's not. So we'll still mix in some Bourne, but Jawan seems the better pick out of this group for me. All right, let's jump into position by position. But I like to show the stacks in that manner because that's really what I'm trying to attack. Let's look at previous weeks. Like we're trying to find these groupings of players that this week was a Goff to Amon-Ra week. So there was like one stack. And then we could have attacked the Giants offense and got Neighbors and Wandale. Like that would have been lower likelihood because more people were on the Cowboys that week. But we easily could have got to Javonte and Jake Ferguson. And then like at running back, that's the one where you're really just looking for a positive matchup. So they don't necessarily have to be correlated to your other plays nearly as much. There's a few stacks there. Like if we targeted the Lions, we had a good week. If we targeted the Cowboys and we had this stack, we had a good week. Let's go to week 3. This week, the stack was Geno to Tucker. There weren't as many stacks this week. This was kind of a tough week for us. We had Kyron and Puka both top 5. McCaffrey and Pearsall both top 8. You had QB5 to tight end 1 connection there. So not as many stacks this week, but week 4 was very stacky. We had Omarion Hampton and QJ. You had Bijan and Drake. You had Stafford and Puka. We had Bucky and Emeka. Yeah, so you had a lot. And then you also had Pitts with all of the Atlanta guys as well. So like this week, if we would have attacked the Falcons, the Rams, the Chargers, and the Buccaneers, like we would have been good. Like we would have had lineups with all the combinations of these guys. That's what we're trying to achieve, is to find that the game that we think is going to score a lot of points and pluck the 1 to 2 players out of that game that are going to go off, that are going to be in this top here, who are going to have those outlier outcomes. And we're not going to try to be perfect about it. We're going to have like our heavier guys that we think are more likely to hit, like these guys at the top here. Like on the Rams, there's multiple guys that could take those touchdowns, but we're going to narrow it down to Kyren and Devontae, we think, being the most likely. Same thing with Josh Jacobs and Tucker Kraft. We're still going to build scenarios where the offense has success, and these aren't the guys getting the touchdowns, but we're going to focus on the most likely outcomes and then sprinkle in some outcomes that are more outliers on top of that. But we're going to focus on the core guys that are most likely in good scenarios to have big games and then build off of that. All right, now rant over. Let's jump into quarterback. My top 3 guys this week are Dak, Justin Herbert, Drake May. Herbert's going to be I'm probably going to do a few more lineups with Herbert than everybody else, but these guys are just all in good environments, have all shown the ability to score a lot of fantasy points. I think it just sets up really well for them. I'm going to be a lot more spaced out at quarterback this week. I think there's a lot of guys in like pretty good matchups that I want to go after. Baker, Stafford, Jordan Love, Daniel Jones, Sam Darnold, Bryce Young. I'm going to try to build around 8 lineups each with those guys. That's the next tier for me. Definitely believe in Herbert and then Prescott and May the most, but I feel pretty good about these guys as well. So I'm going to be spaced out, building stacks with these guys, and then really getting back to my core offenses with all the other position players to fill in around them. That's really what my strategy is going to be this week. It's going to be more spaced out at quarterback, but more concentrated at the other position groups. If Kyler plays, we'll build 5 lineups with him. He's just easy to build lineups with, and he can have those outlier games occasionally. Mac Jones will play a few of those Tampa Bay, San Francisco, like shootout scenarios with Mac Jones lineups. Eventually, I think the Jaguars are going to pop. I'm going to build 5 lineups with Trevor Lawrence. That'll give me leverage on the field. And if they hit, those will be some really nice lineups. Joe Flacco at 4K. It's I don't see it. I think they're just going to get dominated. That offensive line is trash. Even with Higgins and Chase, like it's hard to see it happening. But there is a scenario where Flacco throws for 3 or 4 touchdowns in garbage time, and we know where those are going to go. So we'll build a few just in case Flacco lineups. I don't believe in it. I think he's like coming off of a short week, learning the playbook, and then playing on Sunday with just a horrific offensive line and a horrible matchup against the Packers. I don't see it, but we'll squint a little bit and build just a few just in case. And then our other just in case lineups will be Tua, Geno, Rattler, and I actually will build my first Cam Ward lineups this week. I'll build 2 of those. I think Calvin Ridley is actually somewhat interesting at 4,900 with the Titans. Running back, core plays, Josh Jacob, Javonte, Kyren Williams, Rico Dowdle. Those are going to be my highest owned running backs. I'll get to Jonathan Taylor whenever I can, but it's pretty much just not happening. I've built roughly 50 lineups so far, and I have him in 1 lineup. I'm just not getting there. Genty has a good matchup this week against the Titans. If he gets any space, he can have big games. I'm going to try to get to him a little bit more, actually. For me, it's basically these 4 guys, and then these 3 guys are really where I'm building. So I'm going to try to be closer to 15% with all 3 of these guys, with Rachaad White and Quinson Judkins. Jonathan Taylor, I just don't think I can get there. I'm fading McCaffrey, Achane, Henry, Walker. Pretty concentrated at running back this week. Just feel really good that 2, 3, really all 4 of these guys have a very good chance of being top 5 at very attractive prices and very good matchups. And then these guys, I think, have that opportunity, but not as likely as these guys. Not as great as a matchup, not as good as a scoring environment as these guys. These guys are all in very good scoring environments this week. So we're going to target that range. We're fading a lot at running back this week, but we're going to avoid expensive chalk, and we're going to go with a little bit of these guys will be somewhat chalky, but I think the guys at the top is going to take, like if you're playing McCaffrey, you're not getting to Jacobs. If you're playing Taylor, you're not getting to Jacobs. If you're playing Achane, you're not getting to Jacobs. So therefore, I think Jacobs will actually be a lot less owned than what a lot of the projections are showing right now, because people are going to want to get to Taylor, McCaffrey, and Achane, and we're just not building that way. So I think he'll be closer to around that 20% number, so we'll be way above that. Javonte, just a beast on a good offense, and he looks explosive. Kyren, a beast on a really good offense in a fantastic matchup. And Rico was a beast last week, has a good matchup this week, should get all the volume, got the revenge narrative. offensive line blocked extremely well last week in the run game. That all sets up really well. I like this group a ton. And then I think these guys all have outside shots of getting 25, 30 points as well. So I will sprinkle them and try to get them closer to 15%. These guys will all be well above 25% for me. I'll have plenty of lineups with 3 of these guys in it. I feel the best read I have on the week, I feel like, is at running back. I feel really confident about it. I feel like Taylor's the one that scares me of these expensive guys. Taylor is the one that I think has the shot of having like that 40-point game that buries us. I'm just not finding it to make sense to build those lineups though, because a 40-point game is such a huge outlier. Like it's very rarely happens. And so I'm going to bet against that very low likelihood of an outcome. And I just think that there's going to be one of those games where Tyler Warren's going to get 2 touchdowns or Pittman's going to get 2 touchdowns. And I think this week has a good chance of it being that week. So worried about Taylor, but I feel confident about our process this week. As long as we can avoid a 40-point outcome from Taylor, he won't kill us. At wide receiver, wide receiver's a little bit harder to nail down this week. I feel very confident about our Charger receivers here, plus Diggs in there as well. Like I'm really loving this range from McMillan to Pittman. Like I'm getting lots of times I'm getting 2 of these guys in my lineups, and I like that a lot. So what basically is what's happening, I'm ending up with one of either JSN, Egbuka, Pickens, Devontae, and then 2 of these guys are what's happening in most of my lineups with McMillan, QJ, Stephon Diggs, Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen, and Michael Pittman. So I feel pretty good about that. That'll be the vast majority of my lineups will be some combination of that or one of the wide receivers or 2 of the wide receivers that's stacking with my quarterback that's not a part of this grouping, and then 2 of these guys, or just one of them, depending on how that builds out. But from a value standpoint and a matchup standpoint, these are the guys I think that are most likely to go off. The other guy that I kind of like over here are my punt plays that I don't want to get 25% on a punt play. I want to stay around that 10% mark, but Ryan Flournoy jumps out to me at 3,600. As long as Turpin doesn't play, it just feels like he's going to get very similar work to what he got last week for at least one more week. So keep an eye on him. He's my favorite punt play. Guys that I like, but I'm not going to get to a ton. Obviously, love Puka, but just 8,700, I can't really get there. Brian Thomas, I'm going to try to mix in a little bit outside of my Lawrence stacks, maybe 4 or 5 lineups outside of those stacks. It's just a little bit harder to get to at the 6,200 when you have a lot more value. I feel I feel a lot better about McMillan, Johnston, Diggs, McConkey, and Allen all having 25-point games more than I do Brian Thomas Jr., which is kind of a crazy thing to say now that I say it out loud. But he hasn't really shown it yet. I think that week is coming. It might be this week. It's not like a great matchup, but it's not like a horrific matchup either. They play Seattle. So it depends if Witherspoon is playing. I like the Travis Hunter angle a decent or a little bit less, but if he's not playing, I like Travis Hunter quite a bit. So I think there's better days coming for the Jaguars, but I'm not really going to bet on it necessarily being this week. I will have a few bets on it being this week, but it's not going to be a core play for me. Waddle, I have him as the comeback in a few of my Charger stacks. Mix him in a little bit. Obviously, he is like the main guy for Miami now. So I probably need to mix him in a little bit more. Try to get close to that 15% number, but their matchup grades just look horrific against that Chargers defense. I think it's going to be more of a one-sided affair. So I'll probably be around 10%-ish actually with Waddle. I like Pearsall, but it doesn't sound like he's going to play. So Dobbs and Golden are guys that I'm getting to quite a bit because they're lower salary, and I can definitely see coming out party big games for them. Dobbs just had a 3-touchdown game. Golden, this definitely could be a week against the Bengals where he has his breakout, gets a few big plays. So at 5K, definitely sprinkling him in, probably more than most out of this group. He'll definitely be closer to my 15%. Same with Dobbs, mixing them both in there. And then Ridley, you could see it. Like they've had really tough matchups all year long. They finally get a little reprieve playing, I believe, the Raiders this week. Yeah, they play the Raiders. kind of a neutral matchup, but this is the first time all year that they've had a neutral matchup. So could see a little bit better days for Calvin Ridley and Cam Ward. So we'll mix him in a little bit, but I really like Jawan Jennings if he plays. I think he'll kind of step into the role that Bourne had last week where he got over 100 yards receiving and like 10 receptions. So I think that'll be Jennings this week if he's back and healthy. If not, then we'll like Bourne even more. But there's some guys in this range that we like too. Hunter looked really good on Monday night. This might be that breakout game for him. It feels like it's coming. So at 4,700, want to take a few shots on that as well. Same thing with Shaheed. So a few guys more. I like the range more down here from Dobbs down, mixing that in more, especially when we need to go grab some salary in that range. So like those guys, but really love the core group of guys that we got this week. Really going to be betting on one, hopefully two of these Chargers receivers to hit this week. Our punt plays, Downs, Brown, Coker, Horton, Iomanner, Leggett, Wicks, and Flournoy. Flournoy being my favorite. I like Coker too if he is to play. So fading a few guys, nobody too crazy. Fading Harrison, Jamar, Zay Flowers, Jacoby Myers. But yeah, I feel pretty good about the group thing that we have here. This is obviously, wide receiver is the hardest one to nail week in and week out. Want to try to get that player pool down, but this is the one where you got to keep it a little bit wide and just try to find that right combination of three guys. Hopefully those three guys, hopefully five of those, hopefully we have all top five in this grouping. If we have all top five in this grouping, we're going to be having tons of combinations that are going to be really successful. But if we can get three out of the top five in there, we'll also have tons of really solid combinations that hit for us. Tight end, I'm keeping it pretty simple. My favorite of the week is actually Tucker Kraft, and followed by Jake Ferguson and Tyler Warren. Going to be pretty evenly dispersed among these three tight ends. Other guys that I will mix in, Hunter Henry, he's primarily going to be with my stacks with Drake May. Trey McBride, I'm only pretty much going to play the same thing of my stacks with either Murray or Brissett. Waller, I like a decent amount. He's kind of my go-to if I can't quite get to this 4,700 number. Also like Tonjes quite a bit. Barner, I like this range. And then Fannin and Otten, you could squint and see it a little bit, but primarily this range is where I really like here. The vast majority, I'm probably going to have roughly 30% of all three of these guys. And I'm definitely building a good chunk of lineups where I'm stacking two of these guys, where I'm doing a two tight end lineup. Ferguson and Warren, Ferguson and Kraft, Warren and Kraft. Yeah, like all those different combinations quite a bit there. And defense, I'm keeping it very simple. I'm playing the Browns. If I magically end up with 3,700 and I can get the Packers, I like that a lot against Joe Flacco on a short week and a horrible offensive line with Micah Parsons. Yeah, sign me up for that, but it's just going to be hard to get to. The Browns have one of the biggest matchup advantages I've ever seen on this spreadsheet. Let's pull up our defense here. Yeah, one of the biggest advantages, 30-point advantage in pass rush versus pass block, which is massive. It's the third biggest on the week. And then just an overall defensive advantage of 22 points, which is the second highest on the week. And they're at 2,500. So I'm just going to go slam dunk on that, go 100% Browns unless I can get to the Packers. I have a few scenarios where I've had to get to the Titans to get a lineup in there, but legitimately I'm going to end up like 90% Browns here. That's just where I feel like the good matchups, the best value is by far. These other matchups are good, but they're just so expensive with the lack of value in this week's slate. I'm not really getting there. Yeah, I'm pretty much just going to be Browns and Browns only. All right, my friends, let's build a lineup real quick. Let's build... What do we want to build with as our go-to? Let's do a Daniel Jones skinny stack lineup. This is the week Tyler Warren scores 2 touchdowns. We're just going to play that they dominate that game. Let's go get my favorite running back stack with, well, not really a stack, but my favorite combo of Jacobs and Kyron. And then I want to bring in, we'll just go with both those running backs. We'll play that as how it plays out there. We won't bring any more from that game. I do want a Cowboy So we'll see what we end up with there. Let's go get our Chargers wide receiver. I think eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I think there's pretty equal opportunity of one of these guys going off this week. We'll just throw in McConkey there to get started. Let's go ahead and put in our defense because we know where we're going there. We're going with the Browns. Let's go back to our sheet here. Who do we want to target that we haven't targeted yet? We don't have a Cowboy yet. We do have our main stack. We're already here. We got Ram. We've got our Packer. So we need to figure out a way to get a Cowboy. So it's either going to be Javonte, Jake, or George. Look at how much salary we got left. And we can also get down here to a little game stack if we wanted to. We bring in Teterow, McMillan, or Dowdle as well. So let's do this. Let's go McMillan, and then we'll go get Javonte here. Okay. So there we have our game stack there with Javonte and McMillan. Now wide receiver, I got the perfect guy at 4,900. So we have, the options we have. We could do Ridley. That's in play. The guy I'm going to go with is Juwan Jennings. I just think if that game gets into like a shootout type game, he's the most likely guy to end up with that like random 10 target game like he had in week 2. But get into the end zone a couple times, get over 100 yards. I could see that being Juwan Jennings this week. They just don't have people to go to. They had to lean on Kendrick Bourne last week, and Juwan Jennings is a huge upgrade to Kendrick Bourne. So, yeah, give me that scenario, assuming that he plays. So we got our Daniel Jones to Tyler Warren week. They have Jones throws for 3 touchdowns, 2 of them to Warren. The other one goes to Pittman, but he's not the wide receiver we need this week. Jennings actually outscores and puts up a 30 spot with 100 yards and a touchdown. Teterow and McMillan finally has that big breakout game, gets that 130-yard game, 2 touchdowns, 10 receptions, just absolutely dominates in a shootout game against the Cowboys. In that shootout game, Javonte Williams rushes for 100 yards, scores a touchdown in the air and 1 on the ground. Also has 50 yards receiving, has an absolute beast game. Josh Jacobs scores 3 touchdowns on 110 yards against Cincinnati as they win 21-0 against the Bengals, and all they did was give Josh Jacobs the ball. The Los Angeles Rams win 28-3 against the Baltimore Ravens. Kyren Williams scores 1 touchdown in the air and 1 on the ground and has 200 all-purpose yards and dominates. And the Browns obviously pick off Aaron Rodgers twice and score once. They have 4 sacks, and I win $1 million because of this lineup. There it is, my friends. I appreciate y'all tuning in. I hope that this was helpful. I wish you luck in week 6. I hope that you get second place because you already know that I got first place and I'm taking down the Millie this week. Thanks for tuning in, my friends. I really do appreciate you. If you want a copy of my player pool spreadsheet or the matchup spreadsheet, I am happy to share that with you for free. Just leave me a comment, shoot a like, and then shoot an email to Milly Maker Maniac at gmail.com, and I will send that over to you, whichever you like, or if you want both, just let me know at no cost. All right. Thank you, my friends. I appreciate you. Good luck this week. We'll talk to you soon.